Hi everyone, welcome to the sixth session of the Journey Builder Fundamental series. And today we have Sandesh going over the advanced activities in the Journey Builder. So, in the Fundamental series, as you may be aware, we will be covering all the out of the box features. So, we have two more sessions in this series the next Thursday and again next Tuesday. And after this, we have the deep dive sessions followed, so we have multiple sessions lined up for the deep dive sessions as well. And if you missed this, we have hands-on sessions happening every Wednesday. Make sure that you register to each and every event so you get all the notifications. With that, I will turn it over to you, Sandesh. Take it over. And once again, thanks everyone for joining the session.
Thanks for the introduction, JB, and thanks everyone for joining. As JB mentioned, we'll be going over the wait until event today. It is an out of the box journey activity, but it tends to be a little complex and advanced just from its nature. Like as soon as you introduce API integrations with any system, it tends to be a little complex. So wanted to go step by step on what it is, how it works, and how would you set it up using a sample use case. The use case that we'll look into is a little simple, right? What it does, and we'll go over this later, but what it does is it sends an email and then looks for an interaction. And immediately as a customer clicks on a link, it will perform an action. For our use case, it will create a task in the CRM, but you could imagine it being anything else, right? It could be sending a follow-up email, creating a case or anything like that. So very simple use case, but it could be as complex as you would want. Before we dive into that, however, JB already mentioned we do have a few. Just wanted to call out a few of the next sessions. Right, today we are on the top row of this table, doing the wait until event. We have reporting analytics and journey planning strategy, and other sessions coming up. They're pretty cool, so please check them out. And like JB already mentioned, we also have hands-on sessions where you could be the builder. I don't know, I'm not sure if we have builders lined up already, so please reach out to Tim or JB if you want to be the builder for the upcoming weeks. We have the next 3 hands-on sessions, which are generally on Wednesdays. So tomorrow is the next one that will cover the API event journey that Tim will be leading. The hands-on session for this session, particularly for wait until event, is planned for 9/18. So please let us know if you want to be the builder. All right. So with that said, let's get started with today's session. The agenda is going to be, we will briefly review wait activities in general. There are a couple of options available, and Tim covered some of these, but just wanted to level set and see what other options we have to wait for customers' engagement before we dive into one of the complex ones, which is wait until event activity. Then we'll look at an example use case, first using an engagement split, and then using the wait until event, and see how the journey canvas looks like for both these techniques. And then we will move on to the meat of the section, which is wait until event. We'll see how to configure the activity. We'll see on a high level how it works in general. And then we'll see a specific implementation of it using Cloud Pays as a trigger. The trigger for wait until activity doesn't have to be a Cloud Pays, but since it's within the Marketing Cloud ecosystem, it kind of makes sense in a lot of cases to use the Cloud Pays as a trigger. And if you're not sure what that means, we'll cover that in detail. And then we'll wrap up with QAs and a link to a few resources. Okay. All right. So what are the options for wait activities? Like I said, Tim already covered some of this, but let's go over some of the main ones. The first one is wait by duration, right? And I have listed the use case there in the right column in the table. This is as the name suggests, if you want to wait a particular amount of time, right, 2 days, 3 days before something as a follow-up happens, then wait by duration is your go-to. In the example use case, we want to send a follow-up email 2 days after a customer purchase, right? Maybe asking for a review or anything else that you would want to do. Or maybe you create a task for your representative to follow up and ask how the product has been, right? Anything like that, wait by duration. Wait until date is if you want to wait until a specific date to do a particular activity. You can think of this as like a scheduled send in some ways, right? And you could use this for that. So you wait until a particular date and then you send an email. Pretty trivial use case for that, but you could do that. In the use case, we have, if you have a July 4th sale for loyal customers, then you could wait until July 1st or whatever your use case demands. And for that use case, you'd use wait until date. Now, there's another interesting one called wait by attribute. And this can be a little confusing when reading the description, but what it does is it's kind of like wait until date and wait until duration, but based on a particular customer attribute. What that means is that imagine you have a session that's 3-day, right? You have a seminar that's a 3-day seminar, but people can pick a particular session to join. So you don't really know in advance which day they will pick. Some people could pick the first day to join, second day, or third day. But you have a use case where you want to remind them exactly one day before, right? Somebody say the sessions are 5th, 6th, and 7th of December. Then you want to remind everybody that joined on the 6th of December, on the 5th of December, and everybody that joined on 7th or like plans to join on the 7th of December, on 6th of December. And you don't know which is which. So what you can do with wait by attribute is that you can tell Journey Builder to wait exactly one day before their signed up date. And of course, that signed up date has to be one of the attributes in the customer or in the contact that's entering the journey, right? Using that field of signed up date or whatever you have, you can send an email or you can do an activity exactly a day before. So you use wait by attribute in one of those use cases. And now finally, we have the wait until API event. And it says API event in the table and wait until event in the icon. Don't worry about it. It's just there is a group of wait until events. There is also a wait until, I think, push event and chat message. All of them work very similarly. The wait until event, the generic one, is the most flexible one because it allows you to trigger an activity from any of your external systems. As long as the system can make an API call to Marketing Cloud, you can use this. Whereas if you use something like wait until chat message, if you have a chat message, you need to have a chat message before that activity. And it restricts your ability to wait for events because you can only wait for the chat messages, right? You can't wait for landing page loads or anything like that. But if you have a use case, if you have a journey which starts with or which has a chat message in the middle, then those events will make sense. However, the idea is exactly the same. Wait until event. The API one is a little more complex because with flexibility comes some responsibility, right? You need to set everything up yourself, whereas activities like wait until chat event are pre-configured to work for chat messages. Right. So for the wait until API event use case, like I mentioned earlier, we'll be creating a task in the CRM as soon as a customer clicks on the email CTA. And we might not be doing this today, but we'll be doing that in the hands-on. We'll just see the overview and how it works today. Okay. Moving on to the use case. So the first email asks, let's imagine this journey where the first email at the very beginning of the canvas here asks if the contacts are interested in learning about a new line of products before they are released, right? These could be your alpha testers or beta testers or whatever you have in the use case. It sends an email with a very clear CTA. And what the engagement splits here are doing, so there's one engagement split here that's waiting for an hour. And if somebody clicks on the email, clicks on the CTA, it's immediately creating a task for somebody to follow up or whatever is in your use case, right? And then it's again sending everybody that did not click on the CTA to another path where it waits for a day more. And then if they now click, it joins it up to the same path, which means it's again going to create an activity after a day. And again, for the final time, if nobody clicks on that email for a day, well, day in an hour, and then they will be fed into this other path, number 3, and we're going to wait for 6 more days. And now if they click again, we're going to join them back up to the very top path where a task will be created again, right? And if they do not click the CTA for 7 days and an hour, then they will be sent a follow-up email, maybe reminding them or telling them that if they are interested, contact us, or anything like that. Right? The idea here is that we send an email and we look for engagement. If somebody engages, then we create a task. Otherwise, we send them a follow-up email. Pretty simple use case, but looks like using engagement split, you cannot really do a real-time task creation, right? That's the problem here. And the reason we have so many layers here, why could you not just do a 6-day? That's because if somebody clicks within an hour, we don't want to delay that task creation for 6 days, right? You don't have a choice in how long you wait. You would ideally want things to happen immediately. So if somebody clicks in an hour, create a task at that time. And if somebody clicks in 4 hours and 15 minutes or whatever, then you create a task immediately, right? You don't wait for 6 days. However, engagement split is limited and you can't really do that. Now let's see how we can do the same thing with wait until event activity. You see that the canvas is very much simplified. All you need to set up is that there is an email, and now you just have the wait until event activity. If the event occurred, create a task. If the event didn't occur, then send a follow-up email. Simple, right? This simplifies this view by a lot. And it's also clear in the concept. As in here, we had to kind of look at it and understand what is even going on. Here, it's very clear from the journey canvas itself what's going on. We're just waiting for the event. If the event happens, in this case, the event is clicking on the CTA, but it could really be anything. If the event happened, we create a task. If it didn't, we send an email. All right, so just a nuance here. How do you know if the event didn't happen? We'll go over this later when we configure the activity, but there is something called an expiry time. Right? You set up something like 6 days, for example, and then if nobody clicks, or like for contacts that didn't click within 6 days, we'll send them automatically to the no event path. Now, it does have that maximum wait duration, but as soon as a contact clicks on the email or does the activity, then they will immediately be pushed forward onto the next activity. All right. Please keep sending the questions. I'll look at them at the very end. And if we don't have time to answer them today, then we'll make sure to address them either in the slides or in the hands-on sessions. So thanks for whoever is sending questions. All right. Finally, so this activity is a little complex, more complex than engagement split, right? Engagement split, all you need to do is set up those 2 paths. But in wait until event, you need to configure a bunch of things beforehand. There are 4 major categories or configuration variables in the activity builder. The first one is an API event. So this is the brains of the activity. This is what receives the API calls from an external system. And also the data extension, the second part is tied to the API. So when you create the API event in Journey Builder, it also asks you what data extension you want to tie that API event to. And this is the data extension that the API, whoever comes in through the API, right? The API needs to have the contacts information. All that information is going to be logged into this data extension that's tied to it. So say an API call says, Sandesh clicked on an email, right? I clicked on an email, and then I have these attributes, right? You can pass other attributes, and the data extension has columns like subscriber ID, email, and other attributes for myself. And the API event, when it receives that API call, will log everything about me into that data extension. You can think of this as the entry source data extension for the API entry source, because they work very, very similarly. And I think we already went over that entry source, right, a couple weeks back. So please review that session if you're not sure what that means. The idea is the API and the data extension are closely tied to each other. Whatever comes in through the API is logged to the data extension. And now we can also configure optional filters and you can filter on either the journey data or contact data. And this filter is so that you can filter people out. Even if I come through the API, if I don't have the right attributes, then don't pass me on to the next activity. Right? You can configure logics like that. And here there is a note. I should have probably highlighted this second point in the optional filters part. When you configure a filter here, you have two options, right? Journey data, contact data. Contact data is the normal contact data that you bring in through the data designer. Journey data, however, here is a little confusing because it's not really the journey data that's tied to the journey entry, which it generally is. Here, the journey data means the data that's coming in through the API. Okay. And finally, like we were talking about before, we have the maximum wait duration. This is the maximum time for which the wait until event activity will listen to events, will track events. And when this expires, all the contacts that didn't click, for whom the event didn't occur, will be sent through the no event path. So the bottom path here. Like after whatever time you configure here, say 6 days, they'll be sent in through the bottom path. All right. So let's move on to how it works. All right. So step one, and this is without going into the details of wait until event activity, right? Just a high level of how does the activity even work. All right. So the first step is contact receives an email and they click on the CTA. Now they're redirected to an external system. This could be anywhere, right? Like when somebody clicks on an email link, they could be sent to a survey site. They could be sent to a e-commerce site to maybe make a purchase with item already in their cart, right? They could be sent to a plethora of places. And for the purpose of wait until event API, we don't really care what that external system is. As long as we own that system and we can make an API call from the system to SFMC, of course, which we'll see in just a second. So the external system receives the user action, right? Whatever that action can be. Now, the API triggers in the external system via that user action. So if you imagine literally just loading the page, then as soon as that page loads, then the API call is triggered to Marketing Cloud. And we'll go over how that exactly works just in the next section. So please hold on. This is just a high-level overview. Okay, and in that API call, the external system will include a couple of different parameters. The first one is the event definition key. This is the item that will uniquely identify your API event. Remember earlier, we had chosen an API to be part of this wait until event activity. And this exact API will have a event definition ID that uniquely identifies it. And when the external system sends this event definition key, Marketing Cloud knows which activity and which journey it's talking about. Okay. And additionally, it also needs to send that contact ID, right? Because just because an API call came in, you don't really know which contact to let through the activity. So these two will uniquely identify the activity, the journey, and then the contact that pertains to this specific action. And now we also have optional attributes. You can set other contact attributes like first name, last name, whatever your use case demands. And of course, if you have your event filters, if you have the filter criteria defined on a journey data that has first name and last name, then you need to send those here, right? But if you don't, then these are really optional. Now, this mapping, this is not really a step, but this is just to show where the data is mapped. And I was just talking about it, right? So the event definition key maps to the API event, which is kind of like the primary key because it uniquely identifies that API event. The contact attributes are going to go into two places. One, to use as a filter in those attributes. And secondly, they're also logged into the data extension. And the contact ID it's very clear where that's going. It's uniquely identifying that contact. But the contact ID also really goes into the log data extension because this data extension needs to be, sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier. The data extension that we pick here needs to be sendable. Right? So it'll at least have that contact ID as a field. And this contact ID that comes in through the API call will go into that specific column of the data extension. And finally, when that happens, the wait until event activity does two things. One, it triggers and then sends the context to the next activity, which can be anything. In our case, it's creating a task in the CRM. And it additionally also logs those data, that contact attributes and contact ID, into the data extension that's configured. All right. So do we have any questions, Dylan? I'm going to pause for just a second. All right. What else could be the functionality of the CTA? All right, maybe I'll come back to this, back to the questions. So let's move on for now. Okay. So now, we saw in general how it works, right? So user gets an email that gets redirected to perform a certain action, which the action could be as simple as loading a page, but it's an action regardless. The system makes an API call to Marketing Cloud, and Marketing Cloud decides using filters and contact ID whether to move the contact forward in the journey. And then if it does decide that they should be moved on, then it will trigger that activity and it'll also log that to data extension. However, this external system is not really in our control, right? Being Marketing Cloud people, we probably want to also own the system. For example, what if the user is redirected to a Marketing Cloud landing page, right? Can we then perform these actions from a landing page? The answer, as you might know, is yes, because you can write a lot of SSJS and AMP script to make API calls from the cloud page, right? So if you can make API calls from the cloud page, your cloud page could be external system. Now let's see how that works, right? So, right. So again, steps, looks like I missed a step here. To use the cloud page as a trigger, right? Which really means to use the cloud page to make an API call to the journey, we need to perform two configuration steps before the user gets an email. The first one is we need an installed package with an API integration component. Installed packages are really the gateway to doing anything API in Marketing Cloud. This will give you the credentials, the client ID and secret, and the URLs that you need to call to make anything happen. Using this client ID and client secret, you'll be first calling the auth URL that's provided to do authentication. And then you'll be using the REST URL to perform a variety of actions, right? You could do a lot of things with the REST APIs in Marketing Cloud, but for today, we're concerned with triggering that activity. And this is very similar and might honestly be the same under the hoods to the API event entry source. Now, the other setup step that is optional but very recommended is the key management part. We do not want to expose the client ID and client secret because if these are exposed, then any other party that has access to these can get access to your Marketing Cloud environment through APIs. And we probably do not want that. So to hide those IDs and secret from our landing page code, it's best practice to add them to the key management in SFMC. And if we have time at the end, we'll go into the platform and look at where we have these various things. right? So we add these in here so that we can refer to them by names and not by their real values. So if my client ID is 123 and my client secret is ABC, once you add them to key management, they might be called client ID for wait until event, like literally that text, right? And you will not be revealing that 123 and ABC to anybody that might have access to your code. Right. So after these are set up, now the customer, similar to the previous step, customer receives an email and clicks on the CTA. But this time they don't go to any system, they go to a cloud page. And the cloud page, being that system that connects to our journey activity, it will first extract the keys from key management. It will first exchange that text that I was mentioning earlier to the real values of client ID and client secret, which is 123 ABC. This is really just one line. You can just refer to it, but I wanted to call that out anyways. It's not a complicated process, but the cloud page will have the real values. Now is the first major step. You will need to, like I was hinting earlier, now the cloud page will make an API call using the SSAS function, http://post, to the install package, well, really to the Marketing Cloud environment in general, and it will pass in the client ID, the client secret that it just got from key management, and it'll also additionally pass in the MID of your environment. And once you do that, and Marketing Cloud verifies that your client ID and client secret are correct, it will give you a authentication token that belongs to the user. And then after you have the authentication token, now you can make REST API calls. But before doing that, now we need to actually have those subscriber attributes, right? We need to have the contact ID, which is also the subscriber key, and other attributes like first name, last name that you might need to make that API wait until event trigger. And now the question is, how do you extract this information? You might already be aware that there are a lot of context variables or personalization strings in the cloud page environment. I have a link to them in the resources page if you want to check all of them out. But you can extract things like the subscriber ID, email, job ID, and a lot more stuff in the cloud page itself with variables. Right. So once you have those subscriber information, then you are finally ready to trigger that wait event activity, right? Because all you need is that event definition key that you set up earlier in the configuration, that contact ID, which is also the subscriber key, and then any other contact attributes that you require in the filter or you just want to log in the data extension. And so once you have those, then you can make an API call, and then the activity is triggered. If your contact is in there and it passes the filter, they will successfully move on to the next activity. All right, I think, and that was a lot. That was 9 steps. And we do need to write SSAS to do this very part. But I want to call out that wait until event activity by itself does not really require SSAS or any coding on the marketer or the administrator's part, right? All you are doing is actually dropping that activity, picking an API event, and passing that event definition key to your developers or to your external system people, because you are not technically responsible to make that API call. Right? It could be some other team based on your use case. But in this particular implementation of it, we're using the cloud page as that trigger, as the system that makes that trigger. That's why we need to write the SSAS code to make that API call happen. All right. So I'll stop sharing and we'll go into the platform. Just a second. All right. Okay. So let's go in here and then see what those various things are. First, I'm going to take you to the Journey Builder activity itself. Right, so let's go to the event first, because we need to create that event, the API event, before we can drag it into the journey. Right, so we already have this created, but let's see from the beginning what steps this has. You just need a name, and it will automatically populate your event definition key. But you could customize this to your own needs. Please be mindful that you cannot have a period in the event definition. I think it lets you do that, but then you'll have some issues later on. Just the name in this part. And here you select that corresponding data extension that we were talking about before. And this data extension needs to be sendable. So in this one, we have selected one that only has a lead ID and their email as columns. And then we do optional filters here, right? And contact data is all the data that comes from Data Designer. So a lot of stuff in here. However, generally in our implementations, we have used journey data because journey data is the data that comes from the API. And currently we're sending email and ID, right? So these are the fields in the data extension that was picked. And if you need an attribute to filter in your API event, you probably want to send that in your API, right? That's the quickest way. That's the most performant way to do this. Because say I also needed country to filter people, then I would also be sending that country through that API payload. And when the external system or the cloud phase makes that API call, you would also be sending lead country or something like that. You probably have that information when they click on that email. But if you don't, and if you really do need to traverse the contact tree, then you can go here and select that. Okay, and that's it. That's all you need. You just need a name, and in which part it will generate the event definition key, and then you need that data extension that's tied to it. And once you have this set up, then you can go into the journey, and we have one set up here. Let me look for it. I think this is the one that uses that. Okay, so this is the journey, and this is the wait until event. So when we click on this activity, we've already chosen that same API that we just showed. And then this API also has the data extension linked to it. That was the data extension that we selected previously. And now we can add filter criteria or edit that. And you might notice that you can't really edit this data extension. To edit this data extension, you need to edit the API itself. And sorry, that disappeared. All right, but you can configure things like maximum wait duration. The minimum time here is 1 day because you can't really have anything else in here. Day, week, or month. Yeah, so it could be a week or a month based on your use case. Sorry, I was curious. I actually do not know what the maximum time is. Probably several months. I don't know if there is a way to find this. Okay, looks like it's 10 months is the maximum time you can listen to the events. All right, that's pretty much all the journey because everything else is normal journey activities, right? When that event is triggered, it'll go to the path to create the task activity. If it's not triggered, it'll go to sending the second email. All right, so that's it for the journey. And now let's go look at where these things are, right? So if you want to use CloudPhase as a trigger, because if you wanted to use other external systems as a trigger, like this slide showed, right, then you're really done. Right? You have set up, you have thought about your data model, you have thought about what fields needs to be in that data extension, you have set up your event definition ID properly, and you have passed that along to your teams in the external system. Now, if you want to use CloudPhase, then you need to do all these steps. Actually, I will correct myself. Even if you use an external system, you still need to create an install package, right? Because the external system also needs to make an API call. So this is really not optional as long as you're making an API call to SFMC. So let's see where the installed package is in the Journey settings, sorry, in Marketing Cloud settings. So you go to setup and go to feature settings, no, and apps, install packages. We have a ton of test ones here, but the one that uses this is the wait until API installed package. And you can see that the install package itself doesn't really do much. You need to add a component. And here we have added the API integration component. When you add a component, there are a bunch of different options. Some are to create a custom journey activity, which we might also be going over in the deep dive sessions. But the one that we've selected here is the API integration one that will generate your client ID and client secret, and also will give you the URLs to make those API calls. To make the authentication call to get your initial token, you'll use this URL. To make the actual call to the event, to the wait until event, you'll use this one, the REST-based URI. Okay, so once we have that, now we need to add those client ID and client secret into the key management part. So let's go look at the key management, which is inside data management, key management. All right. So we have a lot of them here, but I think these three are the ones that are related to this particular wait until. You need three keys here because of how the decrypt symmetric part works. And before showing you that, maybe it's easier to actually go to the cloud page to see what's going on there. Okay. So this cloud page is the one that we're using as that trigger. However, this implements a little advanced use case. So it has a lot more code than it needs if it just needs to trigger an API call. However, the part that I wanted to show is the top part here, where we actually use this key. All right, so what we have is, hope this is visible. All right. So what we have in the first line here is the encrypted client ID. Right? Like I was saying before, the client ID itself, if you look at it here, is different. Sorry, it's in a different page, but we don't need to look at it. It wasn't this long. It isn't this, right? So even if somebody has access to this code, they won't really know our client ID. And even if somebody has this client secret, they won't know our client secret. They can't even decrypt it because the function that we're using to decrypt these encrypted client secret and ID only work within the same Marketing Cloud account as the one that hosts this key. And so to use this function, we need to pass in a couple of keys like wait until pass key, wait until salt key, and wait until IV key. And you might notice that these names are exactly the same that we have here. Wait until pass key, wait until salt key, and wait until IV key. Using these three keys, it's decrypting that client ID and that client secret to get the real one, which will be held in this client ID and client secret. Here it is, client secret variables that we'll later use to make those API calls. All right, so that's hiding our client ID and client secret. And now the only part that remains to be seen is this logic here in the cloud page doing various things. So extracting keys, like I said before, is really just simple. Here, we didn't really do anything to extract the keys. We just wrote that name, that external key that relates to that key that we have set up in the key management. That our Marketing Cloud automatically connects those two and injects that value in here before using the function decrypt symmetric to get the real client ID. So just want to call out that this step is not necessary. You could have saved the actual client ID and client secret in key management and use them directly rather than using the encrypted one and then decrypting it. But for this use case, this is what we ended up doing. And there's not really a drawback in doing it this way. Okay, so after this, I'll highlight the major sections here. Like I said earlier, it's a little complex of a use case, but I think it's segmented into some logical sections that we can follow. So the first part here with all the bars and is us extracting a bunch of different variables that we'll be using in our API calls. So things like client ID, client secret, MID, this is needed to make authentication calls, to actually get the token that allows you to make REST API calls. Then we have other helper variables, like the base URL that you actually use to make that API call. Right? We can even separate these out. And now we have all the subscriber attributes that is necessary. Or I guess the email attributes, really, including the subscriber key, the job ID, the subscriber email, company, because we're sending the company through the email, and the subscriber full name, and we also have that API event IDs that uses. So in this use case, we're actually doing two API calls, one to the wait until event activity and one to a different API trigger. But we can ignore that for now. We're only really concerned with the wait until event key. These are pretty similar. And now we have everything set up, right? All the variables. Now we really have the first thing that we want to do is to make that API call using http.post to get a token. And this uses client ID, client secret, and the account ID. Everything else is going to be the same for every instance of this code, but these really will be different because it depends on your client ID, your client secret, and your Marketing Cloud account ID. And if all of those are correct, then the Marketing Cloud will send you that access token. And once you have that access token, now you can really make a REST API call to make that wait until event API trigger. Here, we're also getting the journey information because in our use case, we wanted to see if the journey that the wait until event is a part of is in the finishing stage. And this was important to us in our use case because when the journey version is in the finishing stage, all the events that wait until API event gets are ignored. And that was a little weird because just because the version is finishing doesn't mean we want to ignore all the people that clicked on it, right? Because they're already in the middle of the journey. They should really be finishing that journey. But not sure if that is a limitation or a bug on the Marketing Cloud part, but all the events are really ignored if that's finishing. So what we're doing here is that if the journey status is finishing, then we are making a different call to a different API just so that we don't forget about these subscribers that actually clicked on the email. But I'm sorry, so that's a advanced use case. Don't really want to go into that, but mentioned it anyways because it's here. However, doesn't matter. Even if we didn't have that, we still need this event configuration, right? Now we have the token, which is included in the header. And you have a bunch of other things like the subscriber key that you need to put in to your API call. And in this case, we're putting in the subscriber key, and we're also putting in this additional attributes, the email address, the company, and the full name. All this data packaged together will be used in this API call, which is again using http.post, but now it's using a different URL, which is the, where's the URL? It's the REST URL, not the auth URL, because we already have a token, we've already authenticated. Now we're free to make this call. And once we make that call, the event activity is triggered. So if we didn't have this advanced use case, the steps would be you get the keys, you get the actual client ID, client secret, you gather all the information that's necessary to make that API call, which is your MID, your subscriber key, and any other subscriber attribute. You make the first call to get the token. Once you have the token, you make a second call to actually trigger the REST activity. Okay. And yeah, that's about it. That completes this loop. In the cloud page, you do all these steps. It makes the API call to the wait until API event, and the wait until API event will let context through to the next activity. That is all I have. I do have a tip slide here that includes some points that I might already have mentioned, but let's go through them anyways, since we do have time, right? Yeah, we have a couple minutes. All right, so the first tip here is just a Salesforce recommendation. I suspect that this is for performance reasons. So avoid wait times that are shorter than an hour. Doesn't really relate to the wait until API event, but for other things like wait by duration, which does allow you to wait for times shorter than an hour, but the best practice is to avoid that. And the second point is the one that I was just mentioning. Events are ignored when a journey version goes into a finishing status. If necessary, you can use a custom solution like we did to identify the journey that's in the finishing stage and then reroute contacts if the version is actually finishing. And the reroute could be anything, right? You could just log it to a data extension and then use them as an entry source to a different journey. Or you can make an extra API call to a different API trigger journey and then push them through that instead. The third one here is disclaimer that the journey data in the context of the wait until event API means the data that's coming in through the API, not the journey data that comes in through the entry source, which could be different. And the minimum wait time to hold contacts at the wait until event activity is 1 day. You cannot expire the event in less than 1 day. Right, and we have a bunch of resources here. We have a series that goes through all of these steps in detail with a video guide. This was when we were implementing this and showcasing this internally, but we have posted them in our hands-on SFMC site. It goes through the entire step of setting up the cloud page, key management, installed package. So please check out the series of articles if you're interested in learning more. And then this is the link to all the parameters that you can grab in the cloud page, like the subscriber key and subscriber email. There's all the other things, like we use job ID, for example, in our use case to identify the journey. You can use the job ID to get the journey ID. That gets you the version ID. I could be saying this the other way around, sorry. But you can use the job ID to identify if the journey is in the finishing stage through a chain of events. And the last one here is just the Salesforce help doc on how to use http.post, because this is a required function if you want to make API calls from the cloud base. All right, thank you. I will now look at the JB, do you want to call out any?
Firstly, that's a wonderful session, Sandesh. This is quite tricky to understand, but the way you put everything in the slides, the mapping out the details, it is very helpful and informational. Thank you very much, Sandesh. For the questions, I think there are a few questions, but Lakshmi has answered them. Everyone, if you have any other questions, please post them in the chat. So this is answered in the chat. I'll ask it anyways, just so that you can add more details to this. The attributes that you are sending along with the API call will be stored in the log data extension. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. So the attributes need to also map onto the fields in your data extension that you've connected, and then they will be. I will say that if the attribute is required in your data extension and you don't send it through, then your API call will fail. That sounds so simple because of course if it's required you need to send it, but it was a little confusing when I was first implementing it because I thought I sent everything through the API, right? Because technically the only thing that's required is your contact ID, and we were sending that, and the API call was just failing, and I couldn't figure out why. But there was a required field in the log data extension that we weren't sending. So yeah, make sure that if something is required, you send it through the API as well.
Great answer. I don't see any other questions, Sandesh. Let's give one more minute to see if anybody has any questions. I will change the settings to unmute. So anybody has any questions, please unmute and then you can ask directly. And the session recording will
Sandesh,
be
can you talk
uploaded.
about...
Oh, Tim, please go ahead.
Sorry. No problem. Thank you, JB. Sandesh, can you talk about how you'd be able to pass attributes from Marketing Cloud to the Cloud page so that they can be passed back into Marketing Cloud via the API event? Like how to do that?
Right. So when you click on an email, right, and if you're redirected to the Cloud page, I said that there are a couple of attributes that come through, like email and subscriber ID. And in our case, we also have the company, and I forgot what the next one is, but full name or something like that, right? How do you send those attributes through? How does that even come through to the Cloud page? Was the question. And great call out, Tim. I should have mentioned this here, but you need to use the Cloud Pages URL function. And we can go in here and look it up. Cloud Pages URL, SFMC. All right, so this is the function that you would use in your email. If you have a CTA button, that's a link, then instead of using the href attribute directly linking to your Cloud page, you'd use the Cloud Pages URL function and pass in all the parameters. So if you had your Cloud page will have an ID, say that's 123, you'd use Cloud Pages URL, 123, company name, and then pass in that actual value, which can come in through your data extension or any other place, right? Using AmpScript. Anything that you have in here will show up in your Cloud page, and you can use that in your API calls. Great question, Tim.
Sandesh, can you drop the links in your resources page in the chat as well? Just because someone had mentioned about wanting those.
We'll probably have the slides up, but yeah, probably a great idea to also share it here. Copy pasting that. And there you go. Sorry, the formatting is a little off.
And Sandesh, know that just for frame of reference, Sandesh is a builder, a Marketing Cloud builder, and he's part of our team, and I'm not. And Sandesh has instructed, most of our team are not developers, and Sandesh has helped all of us on this team write the SSJS code that he built. Sandesh, can you just talk about, since you've trained us on how to do it, we were all successful to do it. Can you talk about the difficulty for a non-developer to do it? Is it something that we should all attempt? And then if you had any tips within SSJS, because I remember you had a couple that you had mentioned when you were training us, that maybe you could share for those who might be, just starting out with SSJS.
Yes. So trying to think where to start, because it's a big topic, right? SSJS can be pretty complex if you haven't written code before. But a couple of helpful things is first to familiarize yourself with the absolutely essential functions, right? And we have SSJS bootcamps that have been done before in this very channel. So if you go to the YouTube MC Learning Camp, you'll see a lot of SSJS bootcamps. And in those bootcamps, we've covered the essential functions. For example, you wouldn't really need to know decrypt symmetric if you're just beginning, starting out, but you would absolutely need to know some things like get value and set value. Get value is a function that retrieves a value from the AMP script to the SSJS part. And it's really helpful to swap the values out. Just an example, there are some functions that are essential. And the first step is to familiarize yourself with those functions, right? Things that are used in 90-95% of SSAS use cases. For example, HTTP post is also used in 100% of things that use API, right? Because without this, you can't really call an API. You could use http.get, but generally you're also sending in data. That's the first step. And the second thing I found helpful is using debug variables. I don't know if I have it here, sorry, to show. Oh, yeah, so I do have this. So for example, I mentioned this a lot, but I like this during development, especially in Marketing Cloud, because it doesn't really have a lot of developer-friendly tools to develop. So what I like to do is I create a section in the page, just a P section here, for example, that has a border. And the only purpose of this red bordered areas is actually to print out the variables that I want, right? So in this one, since this is complex, I have 3 of them because I wanted to output various different things. So for example, if I'm getting an access token from the auth call, and I want to make sure that the access token actually came through, I first log it into the section here and then see it so that I can visually confirm that my flow is working before I make more progress. And saying that, the last thing I'll mention, that's one. And again, like I said before, we have covered this in detail in the SSAS or AmpScript Bootcamp in the past. So please check out those sessions if you want to understand how exactly to set these debug fields up. The last thing is that using functions in SSAS, like your custom functions, is super helpful. So for example, and this is to really tie things together logically. For example, in our case here, right, what we're doing, sorry, in the beginning is we are trying to get the journey info. The idea is that, is this journey in finishing stage? That's what we wanted to figure out. And this requires a lot of logic. This requires you to actually, so let's go, we're currently using a custom function. Let's see what that function does. And we don't really need to understand the function itself, just wanted to show the complexity of it, right? So first we look up the data view, send data view to get the activity ID itself. And then we exchange that activity ID for a journey version ID. And then from there, we get journey ID. And then so now we have the journey ID, we have the journey, and then finally we get the journey ID and the status. We only needed the status, but we needed to do a bunch of other things that are complex and things that you really do not care about in some ways, right? The only thing you care about is the status. The writing all this code up here is really confusing because it'll be 10, 15 lines of code that don't really have value. So to hide away those complex things, to only extract the value is really important. And that is where custom JavaScript functions shine. I've written this function that given a job ID will give you the journey ID and the status. And another helpful thing about this is that now you can use this, right? Now your non-developer friends can literally just copy, paste this code, and then use this line of code to just get that journey status without actually understanding what happens under the hood. They could look at the code if they wanted to, but you don't have to, right? Because all that complexity is hidden away from you. That's also really helpful. That's all I have for today. And I think we're also at time, but I'll stay if there are more questions. I'm trying to find the chat window.
Yeah, I think we're good, Sandesh. I don't see any other questions, but thank you for covering this up. And all the SSJS and AmpScript related sessions are added to the same YouTube channel. You can find them under the playlist section. We do have hands-on sessions covered very well by Tim, Sandesh, and team. So if you want to skill up on the SSJS or the AmpScript, please go there and check the sessions. It was a great session. Thank you very much, Sandesh. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll meet again tomorrow, same time, for the hands-on session. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.